Hello again, and welcome to the Fantasy Sultans. He is the Hall of Famer Mike Scheck. I am Tripp Rogers, and we are so happy you join us. It is week 5 in the NFL, and this is when it starts to get interesting in fantasy football. But let's take a look at week 4. And Mike, once again, injury bug killing people. And we took a big hit on one of our teams. Well, actually, a couple of our teams with Rashee Rice getting a big fat goose egg.
Yeah, that is, yep, yep. Rashee Rice, of course, it's funny because you never hear a coach talk about anything bad at halftime with the players, but in this case, it was Andy Reid who came out and said, "This does not look good." And now we're hearing reports. We still haven't got the official report. They're calling it a knee injury. We still haven't got the official report, but they're saying he might actually play this season. It depends on the extent of the injury. They're still not sure. They thought maybe it was a torn ACL done for the year, maybe a major ligament damage involved too, which they're still uncertain. I mean, this is crazy. We're a couple days past and they still don't know.
But I again, Mike, it goes back to, and I hate to say it, but that week 1, a Monday night game where all of a sudden Christian McCaffrey, number 1 pick, consensus number 1 pick, fantasy, all of a sudden out.
Yeah.
And now he's gone on IR, and rumors are he's not going to play in November. So if you drafted Christian McCaffrey, I hope you listened to the Sultans,
Yep.
Mac, and picked up some of the players we said in the first week of the season. Because otherwise, the pickings get really slim as you go along here. But there are a couple of them. That's what we're here for. We're going to guide you. Another week 4 note. Monday night, Seattle came into the game unbeaten.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, perfect game pitched by Jared Goff. And Seattle did not look like a 4-0 team or 3-0 team, to be honest with you. And I kind of wonder, because the Lions, I think, look really good. And the Lions are on a bye this week, so Goff is off. But man, that was quite a impressive performance on Monday Night Football. One of the 2 games on Monday night.
Yeah, you know who's a 4-0 team? Moi, right here.
That's why you're the Hall of Famer. And that's why you're the Hall of Famer, and I'm not, because you're 4-0, and there you go.
Yeah, you're right but you're definitely right about Seattle not looking like the same team, but they just had some struggles moving the ball, and their defense is pretty banged up too, and I think that costed them as well. How about some other big injuries? Quarterback Anthony Richardson suffered a hip injury. New Orleans Saints star Taysom Hill, he has an apparent rib injury. Arizona tight end, their tight end Trey McBride. Yeah, Trey McBride suffered a concussion along with Malik Neighbors for the Giants, and then Devontae Adams is also suffering from a hamstring injury. So there are a lot of injuries. I mean, look, we have to each week with fantasy, you just don't know what's going to happen with the players. And like we said at the beginning of the season, hey, we could tell you the players that we think are going to do well. We just don't know. We can't predict injuries. And that's the thing week to week with fantasy. And boy, the injuries are piling up. And here we go. The bye weeks are coming now. And so if you're not dealing with injuries, you're going to be dealing with players on a bye. And of course, we'll be helping you out with our import exports. But Tripp, what are your thoughts on the injuries?
The injuries, listen, I want to go with the Devontae Adams thing because they're saying he's got a hamstring injury.
Yeah.
Something tells me he's not going to play. That's it for him with the Las Vegas Raiders. Listen, he's saying, I'm a good teammate, blah, blah, blah. And remember, his coach, used to play, and I think they're putting on a brave front. I think they want to move this guy. And it's surprising they did not move this guy, because if you watched the wide receiver series, he was going nuts last year, and they did not improve the quarterback position this year. And I honestly think he's out of there. Now, the question is going to be, does he go to the Jets with his buddy Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah.
Does he go to the Saints with his buddy Derek Carr? Or does he go to the Cowboys, who suddenly need a second wide receiver because oh yeah, of course, I can't think of his name, but he's on the injury and they don't know when he's going to come back. Um, folks, I'm being honest. We do this thing off the cuff, but it's just one of those things. I just suffered a complete brain meltdown. Yeah, neither here nor there. Well, let's move on. I'll look it up. You bail me out. You got your import exports.
How about a pair of wide receivers that you want to add on your roster, benefiting the beneficiaries of injuries? We talk about Dontayvion Wicks in Green Bay. Well, he had a nice performance, 5 catches, 78, and 2 touchdowns. Christian Watson left the game with a high ankle sprain against Minnesota, another injury we did not mention. And Wicks saw the opportunity to get more playing time. Now, I don't know if he's going to match the 13 targets he received last week. Jordan Love is also getting healthy, and boy, did he have a nice performance too. And a player that welcomed him back was Jalen Reed, because those two put together some nice numbers at the beginning of the season, and then of course last week. But again, back to Wicks, encouraging for the receiver, being that definitely Jordan Love is back in the lineup. All right, and what goes up must come downs. How about Josh Downs in Indianapolis? He caught 9 targets for 82 yards and found the end zone on Sunday. You can attribute his success to the ageless wonder, Joe Flacco. Yeah, that guy he just never seems to go away now, does he? I mean, and his performances comes in relief. Last season, played well last week for Anthony Richardson after he went out with a hip injury. So Josh Downs is a guy to pick up. What's intriguing here is he has 10.5 yards per catch, and he has big play potential that could lead to high-scoring weeks in the near future, no matter what quarterback is under center, whether it's Richardson or Flacco. So that's an encouraging sign. Let's flip it over to the exports, and it is not encouraging if you drafted Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers. A lot of hope after his 281-yard performance against New England a couple of weeks ago. But last week, just 225 yards, no touchdowns. The weather was dismal, and Rodgers' performance was abysmal. It was just not a great performance by Rodgers. I mean, they did enough. They didn't win the game, but, they did enough to keep them in the game, and I think that was a disappointing loss for the Jets. Rodgers is somebody that really can't keep on the roster. I think if you want, send him to waivers. You could pick up far others. You could spot start anybody else that's on the waiver wire, and you probably feel more comfortable in that situation. Another export is wide receiver Gabe Davis in Jacksonville. He had 9 catches for $121 in 4 games. At this point, really, he's the 3rd wide receiver in Jacksonville, behind Brian Thomas Jr. and Christian Kirk. And once again, Evan Ingram, once he returns to injury, I don't really think you can comfortably start him in your fantasy lineup. Again, 3rd wide receiver on the pecking order. He's an export.
But the other problem with Jacksonville is just their quarterback play has just been awful.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other part of it. And you got to flip it around, because Tank Bigsby, we've talked about him. He's coming on really strong. Even with Travis Etienne injury, he's got a shoulder injury. I mean, he's come on really strong. But the Jacksonville team is just awful. Just awful. So, okay, and let's move past. All right.
Oh, that Dallas receiver, by the way, Brandon Cooks.
I was just going to say Brandon Cooks. I was going to tell you. I looked that up. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, he's out. But I mean, we talked about it. We've talked about Dallas. Really, they're not doing much. Okay, import exports for me. First of all, I'm going to give you. We're starting buys this week, and that's one of the reasons why I'm going to recommend a quarterback, because Jared Goff and Jalen Hurts are both out this week for a bye. So you're going to need a quarterback. And then next week, one of the quarterbacks out is Patrick Mahomes. So you got to pick up somebody. How about Daniel Jones for the Giants as quarterback? Now, you're saying why? Well, listen, they're playing the Seahawks. Seahawks on a short week. Seahawks did not look good on Monday night. And I'm not saying the Giants offense is as good as the Detroit Lions. And again, if Malik Neighbors is out of this game because of concussion, then, I mean, there's a long way to go. But Daniel Jones as a spot starter, I mean, might do well against Seattle. So, yeah, you pick him up. I mean, that's an import for me. Another import for me is wide receiver Xavier Leggett for the Panthers. Andy Dalton is starting, and that Carolina offense has really gotten better for fantasy. They got through a quarter of Sunday's targets from Dalton, and he got into the end zone. He's a guy you want to pick up on waivers, wide receiver. He is also available. Now, I want to go flip side. And the export side, Patriots running back Ramondre Stevenson. 4 fumbles, 4 games. You've got a rookie coach saying, we may start somebody else. This is a guy you paid a lot of money to. And if he sits, he's going to think about it. He's going to fumble even more. New England not going anywhere. It's not going well there. This is trouble with a capital T. That rhymes with P, and that stands for pool. There's your Music Man's reference. But I think in terms of fantasy, Ramondre Stevenson, and we didn't like him coming into the season, and I think we said that on one of our preview shows. Ramondre Stevenson, New England, not feeling him, and again, our import exports are just kind of based on our gut, what we think is good, what we think is bad. The other thing I'm going to say, and people keep waiting, but I'm sure he's rostered. A number of people have him on IR. Quarterback Russell Wilson. I mean, I'm sorry, Justin Fields does not look like he's going to give up that starting job.
No,
and they can say all they want to, but I don't know if I'm going to stake my claim on Russell Wilson at this point. If you've got him on your roster, I would say there are other options available. So I would say export Russell Wilson. We're getting into the bye weeks. We're also getting into the trading season. Michael, what thoughts have you, sir?
Well, I have some thoughts. If you're 0-4, 1-3, you might be desperate to make a trade. Here's some players you can make deals for that can pay off dividends. And we're going to start with wide receiver Garrett Wilson in New York. Now, you might be surprised that Wilson had a better receiving numbers last season with Zach Wilson, actually the past couple of seasons with Zach Wilson as quarterback, than he does with Aaron Rodgers this season after 3 games. He's going to bounce back at some point. He got a touchdown, but here's the thing. You pick him up for Chris Olave or Deebo Samuel Jr., people are going to be willing to make deals. And if you're in a spot where you can get a better player, why not grab him? Somebody may want to give him up. It may be the opposite. And you may want to give him up and flip the script. So it just depends on your situation, but he's a player that could be definitely involved in a trade situation. Josh Jacobs in Green Bay is another player yet to find the end zone. Doesn't have much of a role in the Packers' short passing game, but that doesn't mean he can't be a league winner still. A.J. Dillon, season-ending injured reserve. Marshawn Lloyd will be out for the short term. Week 5, Jacobs should have a breakout performance against the Rams' bottom run defense. The Rams just looked awful last week with their run defense. So Jacobs is a guy to definitely target in a trade. And if you can get him on your roster this week, he might do well for you. All right. Before you export some players, maybe see if an opponent is willing to take the bait. Travis Etienne in Jacksonville. Running back, we talked about the success of Jacksonville. Well, the lack of success in Jacksonville with them being 0-4. But, interesting. He started the game on the sideline last week because of a shoulder injury. Then he comes in and plays and gets twice as many touches as Tank Bigsby, but yet he doesn't really have a great performance. So, a very intriguing player to watch. And I think if you're stuck with him, you may want to move him and see if somebody's willing to take take the bait. And then another player who you may want to move to is Dalton Schultz, tight end. 10 catches, 82 yards last week. Now, 4 consecutive seasons with at least 600 yards, 4 touchdowns. I don't think it's going to happen this season. It's a significant drop-off because of the Texans' talented receiving core. And until the wealth doesn't get spread around anymore, because we know that Schultz was the beneficiary last season of, but now that they have Stephon Diggs in that offense, more wide receivers to go to, too many cooks in the kitchen, as I like to call it. I don't think Dalton Schultz is a player that you want. And again, like I said, before you export some of these players, trades should be considered.
And the other thing about a trade, just keep in mind, try and get like value. I mean, I've had a couple of trade proposals in a couple of leagues, and they're like, it's like, give me a couple of used footballs and a bag, and I'm like going, what are we doing here? No. And the other thing is, and Mike, I want to kind of dovetail this with trading season, because, you get a month into the season and you realize, listen, the teams that are 4-0, Hall of Famer, teams that are 0-4, got to win now. There may be some room, because the 4-0 team may be loaded with players and they may be able to make a move. And again, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So, and one of the things is, if you are in a league and you have 1 win or 0 wins, you've got to shift into a win now mode. Mm-hmm. You've got to win, and you've got to look at your roster. And it's funny because, if I'm going to take the Eagles this week, Jalen Hurts, you're not playing. A.J. Brown has been out and injured. Not sure when he's going to play. Devonta Smith, not sure. Now, I'm not saying you dump them, but this may be a time for you to say, okay, let's make a deal with somebody. And you could be able to, but it's also about the bye weeks. And then keep in mind that these guys will not have a bye. So that's the other thing you've got to consider. And also think about this with bye weeks, because if you have Jake Elliott, the kicker for the Eagles, well, he's on a bye this week. So you got to pick up a kicker. Keep in mind, if you pick up a second person, you're going to have to drop something off your roster. And either you want to keep one kicker, and get rid of a Jake Elliott. I don't know if that's, smart. So I'm carrying 2 kickers on the one team that I have him on. That's something you got to think about. And also, I'm going to give one other tip, because with bye weeks, and especially when you deal with the waivers, like if you go to the waivers and you want to take like the top kicker that's available, okay, you go after him. Well, guess what? Somebody else in the league is going to go after him. Depends on where you are on the waiver wire. So the tip I will give you is try and make 2 kickers with the one player you're going to drop. So you put in 2 bids. So you put in 1 kicker. I think the Washington kicker was the one I picked up in one league. And the player I was giving up was somebody who I wasn't using on my roster. I want to say it was Carson Steele, but I don't think it was. But that's what I'm saying. And then pick another kicker using the same player, because the first one is the one you want. The second one, if you can get him, that's fine. But that's how you get better, other than wait. And then you wake up and you're like, oh, I have no kicker. And the good ones for the week are gone, the ones you really want to get. So that's a tip, because listen, it's not going to cost you anything, because if you got your first kicker, the other waiver goes away, because A, you don't have a player to put out, and B, you already got a kicker. So you're good. That's my little tip on waivers, especially now that we get into bye weeks, because you're going to have to pick up players. And again, you're only carrying 1 kicker, 1 defense, 1 tight end in some cases. You're going to need to get somebody to replace them. You do not want to take zeros unless situation like we had this week with Rashid Rice. Injuries happen. You take zeros, but this is a way to prevent zeros, because I'll tell you something. If somebody starts somebody on bye, that either means they're not paying attention, or they figure they can get away with it. And I'm like, it's still a zero. It's still, you're going into battle with 1 less player. And that to me is bad. But the other side of it is let's be realistic. There are some teams that have no wins right now, and their owners are going to be like, out to lunch, who cares? And that's not the way to play fantasy football. You
No.
will be forever. You will be for and to that credit, okay, to that credit, I got to give our listener Mac, our buddy Mac, because last year he was awful, and he kept playing, and he likes to say he won the consolation tournament. Yeah, okay, great, you won the consolation tournament, but he still was in it, even though he was out of it. 6 weeks into the season. But that you got to keep plugging. You got to keep trying. That's what part of this is. If you give up in fantasy, it's not a good look. And again, you're letting, there are people who are playing, and I remember this. I think it was last year or the year before. I made the playoffs because I was playing the guy who had given up and didn't care, and I mean trounced him, and that cost two other teams. That win I got cost two other teams. They were like, you're playing against nobody. I don't want to hear it. Listen, that's the way the schedule made out. I don't know, right? Yeah. I mean, I got to play the Hall of Famer, and we got to pay. Whatever week it is, we got to play him. Got to play the Hall of Famer. That's it. That's what it's all about. That's what we do. We are the Fantasy Sultans. We are glad you could join us. Again, if you have questions, email, please feel free. Drop it to the Fantasy Sultans at gmail.com. Don't forget, check out my podcast, Tripp's Take. Going to talk about Pete Rose this week, and also what it was like to be in the dark for 5 days. Yes, yeah. Tripp's Take, what's on the top of my mind. Find it the same places you can find the Fantasy Sultans, on Spotify for podcasters, and on YouTube. Just search for Tripp's Take. And you like the music of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, you're listening to WTRSradio.com online. Speaking of being a radio, also, you can catch the Fantasy Sultans on terrestrial radio if you're in New Jersey. Mikey, tell them where they can hear us.
Yeah, you can hear us on Fox Sports Radio New Jersey, Fox Sports Radio Jersey Shore. It's 93.5 FM, 1450 AM in Central Jersey. And then we are on 100.5, 100.1 HD3, and we're also on 95.9 HD3. So we are all over New Jersey on Fox Sports Radio New Jersey.
Sundays at 12 noon Eastern time. Got to mention that part too.
Sundays with the Fantasy Sultans.
That's right. Sunday with the Sultan. That's got a nice ring to it. I like that. Yeah, that's good. And it's your pregame show for Sunday too. And by the way, I guess we should mention that content a little different than what we have on our podcast, since we dropped the podcast on Thursday and this is on Sundays. So, a little bit, we mix it up. We'll throw you a little curveball, little spitball here, We're not ashamed, we'll do what we have to win, we'll do, the gouge thing, the groin, the whole 9 yards. We'll do it. We will do it because we fight dirty. We are glad you can join us. And again, we help you win your league because we're givers. We like you. We want you to win. We try to give you the players, the tips, and the information you need to win your league. And again, we always say it every week, but it is true. We are the Fantasy Sultans.
And you are not.